Hey everyone, back again doing another sketch. This time I am partnering with Sakura to use a bunch of their artist tools to make a cabin inspiration sketch from start to finish. So first, let's go over really quickly some of the tools I'm going to use. So if you've seen my other videos, I'm very into line weight. So the first thing I'm going to talk about are basics, microns. So in this one, I'm going to use multiple colors of microns. I'm going to use black, browns, greens. So these are in a variety of thicknesses from 0.5 all the way up to nice and thick 10 and 12. But these are the things I'm going to use to define my sketch and give it this crisp line weight that goes around the actual objects I'm going to color in with all of these. So these, my koi coloring brushes, you can see I have a bunch of colors in 3 general different families. One are my greens. So obviously, if you've seen my sketches, layering is everything. So lots of greens, so I can do a lot of landscaping around my sketch. Some browns, do a little more landscaping and also fill in the color of the sketch itself. And then some grays for all of our values and our shading. So making sure we have a few of each to accumulate the color and make a nice, rich, deep layered sketch. But then on top of that, we're going to use several, here they are, permapakes. So these are great because these allow us to add line weight on top of our marker strokes, because these are opaque and go on top of everything we draw. Everything else we've shown here is going to soak into the page. Now on top of that, we're going to use a few metallic permapakes, and then we're also going to use our trusty Sakura Jelly Roll. One of the things I use in mostly all of my sketches, but we're also going to add in a few more of the metallic jelly rolls. And this is everything we're going to use for the sketch. So now we're going to do my same process, but using all Sakura products. So let's get started. All right, so for this sketch, we're going to start off with my signature tone tan paper, and we're going to take our light gray koi coloring brush pen. I like using really light grays when I'm doing my base sketch because it allows me to really loosely sketch out what I want to do, whether it's the structure for this sketch itself, because it's going to be a building, or the landscaping. Because now I can make sure my foundation has all of the perspective going into the right direction and make sure all the bones are correct. Because what we're going to do is we're going to tighten this up with a little bit of line weight. So for here, we're using our 0.5 micron, where I'm going to start adding in the thin to medium line weight for this sketch. So I'm working from the front to the back using all of our longest lines and making sure I'm doing those first, because if you do something in the front, you're going to have less likelihood of messing up and drawing something that needs to be drawn through itself. Like for example, if I drew the vertical line of that building all the way down into the deck, I can't go back and fix that. So for here, I'm going in and thinking from the foreground to the background and from longest lines to shortest lines. So I'm going and making sure I get all of the outlines of my building and this deck done first. You can see as we go through this, I'm also going to do a little bit of sketching by hand. Everything should not be super perfect. So there's some spots where I want to have a little bit more organicness, which we're going to go into much more when we start actually adding the landscaping to this sketch itself. But for here, you don't have to use a ruler for everything. This is just a technique I like to have a very crisp style, especially when I'm drawing things in an architectural format, because those, you want them to be very crisp and to the point and accurate. So for here, you can see I'm starting to do the extra details now that the main line weight is finished. I'm doing the interior of this building, and now I'm going to inevitably have to start figuring out all of the smaller details. So the smaller details are going to be things like the side paneling, which is going to take me a minute to draw here. This is something that I find tricky when I'm sketching because you want to make sure that they're actually getting slightly tighter as you go into the background, which can go either really well or can be a little bit messy. So just do this part a little bit more slowly and make sure you're being very methodical. And now the same thing is going to go for any other place you have detail. But here we're going to go and take our Micron 12, a nice thick line weight. If you've seen my videos online, I have a very specific way in which I approach line weight. So when you put thick lines, it helps differentiate your sketch and makes it feel more dynamic. It means it's really clear where certain surfaces are terminating and other ones are not, because a thick line shows the edges of things or where you cannot see the other surface that helps make the edge that you're actually drawing. So now that we have our coloring book done, I like to call my sketches coloring books because I basically spend a lot of time on the line weight and then go and fill it in. We're going to use our cool gray Koi coloring brush pens. So here we're going to fill in all the parts that are going to be steel. And now we're going to start filling out the interior of this product. Sorry, of this building. So for this one, we're going to use our Koi, what color is this? Woody brown, which is a lighter color of what we're doing on the outside. I like using a lighter color on the insides of glass because it makes it feel like that outer color is being lightened by the reflection of the glass itself. And now we're going to use a darker color on the bottom. For that one, we're going to be using our brown. That way, it's the same color that we used on the sheathing of the outside of the building, which was our dark brown. And that allowed us to show that this is in shadow and is underneath the building itself. So now we're going to go and take that same color for the outside of the building, give a little bit of value under those window kind of outcroppings, just to show us a little bit of shadow going on there. Now here, we're also going to take a much thinner micron. We're going to use our brown. And we're going to use this to start putting in a little bit of the line work, which is going to make our wood come to life. This is going to be the knots and the grain and all the things that you're going to see if this was actually a piece of wood in reality. So once we have the base sketch once our base sketch is filled in our coloring book, we're going to go and add a little bit more value, like we did here, putting a little bit of shadow on the interior of the building. And inversely, we're going to also put highlights. So this is where I use my Jelly Roll. And I love having these because you put a nice crisp highlight where the highlights are coming from your light source. So since we're using metal, the edges of all of our metal pieces are going to have a nice bright highlight, which is going to make this sketch pop and really start adding some contrast. So now that we've gotten through the actual building, we're going to go into the landscaping. You can see here I'm really loosely adding in these rocks where I'm adding a light tone, a mid-tone, and a dark tone. And then around those rocks, I'm going to add a little bit of stippling for some dirt. So here, I'm going to go through a whole bunch of different browns and eventually greens to start having a layered effect. This is what I meant in the beginning of this video when I talked about having a rich, deep sketch. When you use one color, your sketch feels flat. When you use multiple colors, it brings a lot of depth that's pretty subtle, but you can definitely tell the difference. So you can see in the back for the grass, I used a darker green. And then for the grass that's slightly under the structure, I used a very dark green. And then in the front, I'm using a very light green, kind of making it feel like the light source is in the front and you're slowly going towards the back. So here, I'm going to go and keep adding a little bit of contrast between all these different lines until it starts feeling right. And finally, I'm going to take some green microns to give some very nice, clean, fine lines, especially up in the front where things are very in focus. If you know photography, it's like having a high f-stop where the front's in focus and the back is a little bit blurrier. The back can be thicker pens, the front will be thinner pens. And now I'm going to take my Permapaques and put some lines on top. This allows me to put grass and things that go above the actual deck and in front of all the rocks. This really shows that these pieces of grass and landscaping are in the front and not in the back. And those I always do last, and it's a nice, great technique. And finally, I'm going to add a few trees with a quick Permapaque white, and adding a few gray dots to show that they actually have a little bit of contrast, and then putting a few more white dots in there to add a little bit of contrast to make this thing feel real. Hope this was helpful. Thank you, everybody.